Our next speaker is going to be Andrew Drozd. He is the director of Project Fibonacci. Project Fibonacci, well, he'll tell you all about it, but it's a major STEM program in upstate New York. It's extraordinary what they do. And I thought it was important that people hear about it because I think it's something that I would hope could be replicated in many other places. So, Andrew.
Thank you, Dr. Zubrin. And I appreciate the invitation to this. This is kind of a new environment for me. In the program, you'll see me listed as President and Chief Scientist of ANDRO Computational Solutions. That is indeed my company. I'm a scientific researcher dealing in radio frequency communications, cyber. So we're actually working with different Department of Defense and NASA organizations to look at the future of communication systems, cognitive communication, and so forth. But today, I'm going to be talking about something different, which, as Dr. Zubrin mentioned, will be the foundations work in STEM education. And it's actually more STEAM leadership based. And I'll explain what that means and why we put the A in STEM. So to begin, the Project Fibonacci Foundation is a nonprofit 501c3 organization that works with communities to encourage youth leadership in STEAM fields. By youth, I'm really talking about pre-K through college, obviously. By STEAM, I really mean it's STEM with the arts. And by the arts, I really emphasize the art of science communication through improvisation, including performance art, the ability to communicate things effectively, and so on. And also looking at the aspects of the art of science the art of music and the science of sound. So these are the kind of art themes that we incorporate and infuse within our programs. So this past summer, one of our programs is a conference. It's a STEAM conference for 1 week in which we actually invite more adult students from high school and college to participate for 1 week in a grand experiment. And I'm going to talk about that experiment, which has a very strong space flavor and Mars colonization flavor. Okay. So as I mentioned, we are dealing with the concept of STEAM, but STEAM can mean anything. Traditionally, it's the science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. But it can be almost anything and be customized based on the theme, the community, the student's interest, and this is the kind of program that we espouse. So it's really youth-centered, it's community-based. We're trying to get the next generation of STEAM folks, well-versed in STEAM fields, looking at the modern themes, looking at things that are popular. For example, space and Mars, moon are all very popular themes again today, thank God. And that's our mission, is to kind of culture these kids in that direction. So this being our 4th annual event, we bring together about 100 kids, select kids that are nominated by teachers, mentors, educators, and even parents. We put them through a program where we focus on 4 pillars. It's leadership, entrepreneurship, technical innovation, and creativity. So the arts kind of infuse itself through the creativity aspect. The common goal is really to improve yourself and bring that knowledge back to your community for community growth. This year's theme is colonizing Mars. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we discussed. There's a picture of our student body that we had this past summer. That's the facility that we held it during the July 28th through August 3rd time frame. We're very strong on trying to teach and bring aboard gender parity. So looking at females, getting them more engaged. Every year, we are about 50 to 52%. So this past summer was about a 51% distribution of females. And this is very good for our program and for the involvement of women in STEM fields. So we're trying to push that agenda as much as possible. So once again, looking at the theme of colonizing Mars, we had teams forming out of this that were looking at different aspects of Mars colonization. I'll talk about those different aspects. But these scholars that you saw are divided into teams. There are approximately 5, sometimes six teams. They compete in a learning project. All of this is team project-based learning for 1 week, very intense, very, very focused. The idea is to collaborate on ideas, expose yourself to different lessons, and start to synthesize what you learn to propose a project. And that project is a plan for Martian colonization. And again, this being the 50th anniversary this year of the moon landing, this seemed to be a very timely topic. So as I said, 5 competing teams this past summer, about 20 members per team, were charged with creating a very coherent proposal that they can pitch at the end of the week with grand ideas about how to colonize Mars. They were exposed to keynote presenters, workshop presenters, and they did independent research and collaborative research with their teams. And each team was to put together a poster presentation, a video presentation, do a 2-minute video pitch and live pitch or elevator pitch to the public at this forum called a STEAM fair. So we then took each team and subdivided them into 3 groups within each team, and these are called proposal teams. We had what we call astro engineers, which are looking at the transportation from the Earth to Mars. How would you enable that to happen? Looking at the time frame of 2019 through 2030. The next group is the explorers, ones that are going to be looking at the permanent Martian bases, and that's 2030 and beyond. And then the Martian colonists, which, again, developing a sustainable society within that group, and then asking the big questions within each one of these different groups, each one of these different themes. Anywhere from what is Mars like and how would we create a society on it, to how do we deal with the challenges of the climate and so forth, and dealing with the physical aspects of gravity, the differences in gravity, how would we do exercise, how would we maintain health, what kind of agriculture, food, and overall sustainability would be at play here. So these are the sets of questions that each one of the teams was presented with, and they had to answer every one of them in each one of their different groups, including the terraforming. Let's see, can you set that? I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button. So, in order to get this started, we presented them with a lot of information. We gave them a lot of sources, from A Case for Space, A Case for Mars, using a lot of different sources of information that they had to do some initial ground research on. And we presented them a variety of videos to give them the sense from the perspective of rover and Pathfinder and so forth, to see how they would take this problem and begin to develop a plan for colonizing Mars and address all of these different issues, not only the scientific issues, but also the governance issues, the currency issues, the economics, and so forth. So they were faced with coming up with a complete plan and then pitched it at the end of the week. So the workshops that were configured dealt with different themes. So if you look vertically, the end of the world as we know it, can life be sustained on Mars? We looked at putting humans on Mars, but looking at the experiments in the Antarctic and the Arctic, and looking at history and the lessons learned from history, from, for example, the Soviet race to the moon. Another particular strand was the Mars laboratories, which looked at the funding and the economics aspects, also agriculture, business, and also how to select the right site to make all of these things happen. Okay. And then additional topics, looking down again, past lessons learned in terms of wellness, health, food services, food stuff, ethical concerns in space exploration, and once again, looking at how we develop above or underground or enclose our agricultural systems. To make this really happen, we got an eclectic set of high-powered speakers, high-profile speakers. Dr. Zubrin was one of them who kicked off the effort for the week, followed by Dr. April Erickson from NASA, an engineer. John Herschel, many of you may know him. He's a mathematician studying at MIT, ex-football player, NFL from the Baltimore Ravens. Max Lugavere, you see him on TV talking about genius foods and about nutrition. And then Science Bob Felder, you'll see him on TV doing science experiments, physics experiments, and so forth. We wanted to make this interesting, fun, very eclectic, bring in the Mars themes, but also bring in other themes that were relevant to the topics. So Dr. Zubrin presented some very good reasons for settling for Mars based on his books and his publications. We presented these at the conference and had him be the kickoff speaker for the event. And basically talked about the space revolution in general, what we need to be aware of, how we can make this happen. Dr. Erickson spoke of her particular journey in her career at NASA, and also the challenges that await Martian colonization. So she gave many, many examples of things to look for, looking at it more from the technical science aspects, looking at how astroscience and astrophysics play an important role and how we need to be aware of these, giving various examples of her personal experience. And as I mentioned, John Herschel, who's at MIT right now getting his PhD in math, what's interesting is each one of the speakers very closely interacted with the students. This was one of the main features of the conference, is the ability, the access, the interactivity with the speakers, asking questions, trying to basically learn what their knowledge base is, and trying to use that as part of their synthesis process of developing their project. So in this case, John talked about his life as a football player and then his migration into the mathematics field and how he lived this kind of a dual lifestyle and life system and his way of thinking. And then Max Lugavere talked again about nutrition, and his book Genius Foods brings out a lot of the nutritional aspects of what we need to know on Earth as well as Mars as well as in general. And he gave some very personal examples of people in his family who had suffered disease. By pursuing proper nutrition, they were able to overcome some of their diseases and some of their infirmities. And one of the presenter spotlights was Jeffrey Montez, who's with AI Space Factory. He's the chief space architect, and he was winner of a recent first place winner in a NASA challenge looking at habitats. So he talked about his habitat design, which basically is the largest continuous 3D printed structure. It's something that's biodegradable and crushed, and can be crushed and can be fully optimized for interior use. And there are some pictures of the interior at the top, and basically what the outside looks like. This was the first prize winner at the NASA competition. And to make things interesting from a more rounded physics science perspective, Felder had given demonstrations of different aspects of pressure, temperature, gravity, and basically showed how things change from Earth to Mars. And he demonstrated this through physical experiments, making it very interactive for the kids that participated. As far as the other topics, which are not necessarily Mars-centric, we wanted to kind of broaden out the experience and give people more of that STEAM flavor, where you start linking together the math and the science and the arts together. So, for example, looking at rhythmic drumming in math, how to communicate and listen. The science of Shakespeare sounds kind of interesting, but there are actually mathematics built into the way you read and expound on Shakespeare, as well as some of the history behind the time of Shakespeare, the space history, the astronomy, and so forth. The hexagon theorem, looking at more of the in-depth math, and many other things. And also putting an emphasis on physical activity and looking at the math of motion. So through the art of yoga and the math of the martial arts. So you can see people got very heavily involved each day into the different aspects of these activities, understanding the math behind it, the health aspects behind it, looking at how gravity, motion, and other things come into play, and to be more aware of that as we come involved. And also looking at nature. I call it Fibonacci in nature, looking at the different aspects of math in nature and looking at the science of nature, and trying to make these different interesting correlations and connections between the art and the science domains in general. Also visiting maker spaces and computer graphics labs where they could actually experiment with the equipment and with the experts there to create things. And again, getting the experience of how would you do this on another planet? And how would you take that knowledge and help others? Also, we do a college and career fair. We're trying to get this next generation of scientists, artisans, and mathematicians and technologists moving forward. We want to connect them with good colleges and good companies in the area that will help spur them on. So we actually have a one-day college and career fair that they can participate in, which involves mock interviews, resume building, and also just industry and academic outreach from the local companies where we had conducted this. And then at the end of the week is a multimedia STEAM fair, like a science fair. You present your projects, you have a poster board, you have videos, your team gets together, your representatives talk about what you're trying to do. And in this case, we're looking at how we would colonize Mars. So each individual project was delivered to the public. Questions and answer periods were allowed to kind of learn what their ideas were, how would they make them happen, and could this be something that we would want to take to NASA and also to our organizations that want to push this particular mission. Thank you. So also tied into this is the IEEE, the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. So they have partnered with our organization to give awards, scholarships, and look at community service projects. Even though we're doing something for Mars, how could it benefit Earth today? And so looking at different aspects of technology and science and even the artistic side, we were able to pull together some interesting projects, two of which are shown here, a lymphedema shoe and a robotic auto music tuner. So we're taking technology, art, looking at how it can be applied in the future, but also how it can benefit current community service organizations. But then at the end of all this, we wanted to tie this into a real environment. And so we connected our scholars to the NASA call for students to submit proposals on the Moon and Mars missions, looking at the Rascal competition, which was recently on the 15th of October, I believe the proposals were due, or at least the registration of interest was due. And the idea is to kind of leverage the Artemis program by looking at going back to the moon, but how it can help us to explore Mars. So we actually connected our teams to this program to kind of take their ideas one step further into the future. And next year, our theme will change. We want to come back to the planet Earth and look at sustainability, climate change, and the Earth's oceans. That's essentially our program. We're trying to, again, teach and cultivate the next generation of students to think about future technology, science, exploration, bring in the arts for communication, look at how sound, music, and other things come into this whole picture. And there are many possibilities that can emerge from this kind of fusion of different eclectic, multidisciplinary domains. And that basically is what we do, and I thank you.
That was a fantastic talk. Thank you very much. I really am
Thank you. It's a little bit of a shift in topic, I know, but...
Look, my son-in-law is superintendent of Frederick County Public Schools back in Maryland. How does he tap into what you've talked about here today? I didn't hear you say anything about the local public school, but I'm sure, you know, that's where all the kids are coming from. How is this replicated throughout the country? And maybe even like not so much a select group that came to this project, right? But the general student population. How do you see?
Sure. If I understand the question, the way the students attend this or participate in this program is that it's done on a nomination base. So we have a website where you can actually get the nomination form, and this can be across the country. By the way, this is not just New York State. It's located in upstate New York, but we get students from all over. We've gotten them actually from France, Germany, and actually next year we're going to get some from Brazil. So the point is that this is an international mini-conference for young adults that covers the STEAM themes and then the sub-theme underneath it, as I mentioned, colonization of Mars this year. Next year it'll be something different. But if you go to the website, there's a nomination form, and any teachers can get those and then can apply or nominate their students for this.
Can you comment on the whole idea of Mars and preparing for Mars in science curricula throughout the country in the public school system?
Sure. What we do, by the way, is we conduct STEAM camps. So in addition to the STEAM conference, we do STEAM camps at the elementary school level. We're trying to teach the kids, or trying to culture them thinking about STEAM, but we specifically use Mars colonization as the connection point. Anything dealing with space, Mars colonization, or themes of that type seem to be very interesting to the elementary school kids. Obviously, you would expect that. And that's the kind of hook, and I think it's a good, honest hook that we need to get them more and more interested and engaged. You're welcome.
So I heard you talk about some of the arts, but I was wondering if you thought about using literature, because science fiction is often a way of doing thought experiments. And I have two questions, sorry. It was just an interesting talk. I was wondering if you could give us a specific example of a concept that a student came up with, or a student group, that seemed very exciting.
Yes, there was one in particular. It was the red team. We call them the red team. They were the first place winners. They actually came up with a scenario over that time frame of 2019 to 2050 where they actually talked about a society that was unregulated at first, and they became very unlawful. Again, looking at the laws and governance, and they began to adopt maritime law, and they tied it into one of the Andy Weir's book, The Martian, if you remember. That was the very interesting connection. So there was a revolt. They went back to figure out what laws do we need in order to govern ourselves and to prevent the kind of potential crime and unfairness that may occur in a society that forms no different than when the European colonists came to the United States, or in America, I guess I should say. So that was one very interesting thing. They came up with a very novel scenario. It was completely contrived, but it could be believable, too, based on what they presented. Yes?
Hi. just want to say what you're doing is fantastic, and
Thank
I
you.
really support it, and it's awesome. So my question is, like, I was talking to my friends, and they said, you know, all it really takes sometimes is when you're in elementary school and that age is a mentor, is someone who is willing to, you know, show that kid or that, you know, that young person just why it's so important for us to do this. And I'm just going to ask, you know, for me, I'm looking for a mentor. Where should I look, and what should I do to, you know, who should I connect with? And it's a hard question, but yeah.
No, it's a very good question. What we try to do, by the way, also is the core of teachers and workshop presenters and facilitators are all teachers and industry people. I want to make that point clear. So it's not people that we pull off the street. Hey, can you teach this? Can you talk about this? We pull in experts, and we talk about a core of people that have very good experience. One of the things that I've learned from talking to them is that don't just rely on your guidance teacher or guidance counselor. Is actually talk to a teacher. This teacher can be a science teacher, a technology teacher, or even an arts teacher. And try to engage one or all of them together so that they start cross-fertilizing ideas. And they see the merit and the importance of what we're trying to do, and they will become not just one mentor, but a core of mentors behind the scenes. That's what we found to be a very successful formula if those teachers are willing to step forward to do that. And many are.
Yeah, I'm a part of the astronomy club at Santa Barbara City College, the vice president, and it's really great because I get to, you know, really interact with the
Right.
teachers. And so sometimes also just takes stepping up and
Exactly.
the courage to just, like, put yourself out there and talk.
Yes, exactly. And also I would say, you know, go to your clubs. If you have, for example, a robotics club or even a drone club, try to engage them. They can actually be the gateway into this kind of new world that teaches people different things. And I really think that's the way to go. It's got to become a little bit more multidisciplinary so that we share the knowledge across these different disciplines for things like this. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be quick. My name is Daisy Zhou. I'm from Mars Scholar Project from World Shaper in China. I'm actually the plenary speaker yesterday morning talking about future Martian needs PBL learning. So I think we are quite connected. That's why
Great.
I come.
Great.
But so first thing is I really wanted to know why you name it as Fibonacci Project. And the other one is that I saw you make themes for each year.
Yes.
Then for 2020, I thought would be Mars related, but it seems like you have another one. But either than that, you do this as within a very good storyline for the whole year project. Then my question could be, how would you make it like sustainable for students at the student point of view? Because students, when are they in primary school year, you may have this, but then they are growing up, you have different like themes. So how you want make it make them like stand with you year by year?
Right.
Thank you.
So I'll try to answer the last questions first. We try to make it sustainable by looking at the hot topics of the day, the important topics of the day. So Mars and the moon landing were very popular this year, and they're going to continue to be so. So this is good. There's already a sustainability feature already in place. Looking at climate change, I'm not talking about the political aspects of climate change. I'm not looking at the argument for something's happening that's different that we're not expecting. So we need to be aware of what's going on and be prepared for that or deal with whatever challenges that may arise. That's an important process. So that's a sustainability feature. This is going to take us way into the future. And I want this next generation to be aware of what the solutions may be or what the impacts may be and how to counter those. Let me go back to the first question, Fibonacci. Well, obviously Fibonacci is based on a mathematical series. It was founded by a gentleman by the name of Pisano Bonacci in the 13th century. And he looked at nature, and he looked at the cosmos, and he looked at all of different things dealing with math, science, and art. And he said, wait, these things are somewhat connected through this series. And by the way, he didn't discover it. I believe it was more like the Egyptians that may have discovered this. Okay, if you look at really the past history of the pyramids, they're based on Fibonacci ratios, the golden ratio. So I wanted to use this as our name of our foundation because it covers the science, art, and nature worlds. And it covers everything related to STEAM, as we call it. That was the reason for that.
I come from a state where they talk about STEM, not STEAM. and the arts is totally left out of it. I think it's very important, but could you just give a few moments to saying, how does one communicate to people who are adamant about STEM rather than STEAM?
Right, excellent question, and I run into this almost all the time. I would say that basically 90% of the people I talk to understand the STEAM theme. They understand what we're trying to do. By the way, I didn't make this up. This has been, conceived by others many times in the past. But the other 10% say that, no, you start throwing in the arts, you dilute the science and the tech and the math and all that. And I say, I don't think that's true. What we're trying to do is not say bring every art into this. Bring certain arts that we think could help you to communicate better. For example, Alan Alda has a science center at Stony Brook, where he actually teaches the art of science communication based on being the host of the PBS series Scientific Frontiers for 14 years. What he learned from that experience was that the scientists will talk in their own jargon, and it's very difficult to understand really what they're trying to say. Oftentimes that may be true. So he came up with a program of science communication using improvisation, acting techniques, performance art, he's an actor, to help enable the communication in a less jargonized way or a less jargonese way. So we find that this particular kind of art form plays very important into whatever we do in STEM. And also, if you look at music, and the musical patterns and the beats, that can actually help you to understand communication better, to be able to listen and then to come in and communicate when you're listening at the same time. So what I'm trying to say is we don't want to bring in all forms of art. That would indeed perhaps dilute the science behind it to some extent. We want to bring in certain types of art forms that would help us to better communicate the science and understand the science and the math underneath it. Last comment. Math is common to everything. I think no one will argue that. Math is common to art or science or technology or engineering or whatever it is. You pick a subject and math is in it. A very strong point that we make here is the math connector. So in order to understand the math connector, why can't we make it interesting and intriguing and enticing to understand the math? Music is one way of doing that. Thank you.